Hello everyone. So we have now reached to the first practical service of Azure that we can now configure to use. And obviously, like I mentioned, we're gonna start with directly with the SQL because we're gonna come straight to the point that okay, how we can utilize the cloud-based data services to address our database related requirements. So like I mentioned in the previous video that we looked at how we can create a subscription, how we can go and create a resource group, and then we looked at the overview of the portal, how the portal looks like. What we're going to do in this video, we're going to actually go end to end, and we're going to create a cloud-based SQL database, our first SQL database, which is going to be software as a service, because what we are going to do, we are just going to create a database, and that database, once it's created, is going to provide us all the opportunity to connect to our application, or it can be used to load the data, or it can be, create any kind of schema or any kind of architecture or modeling that we need inside. The only difference that this database is going to be scalable. We don't need to worry about the resources, and we can even control the resources based on the requirement. Like, if it is a developer database, like devs are working on that and they need less resources or more resources, we can adjust it, and based on that we can control our development budget. So which is really cool and different from the way we normally handle the databases in the on-premises environment. Because on-premises environment, remember, if you remember, we went through a series where we installed the SQL Server on the on-premises box, and it was again a virtual machine that we configure on the Oracle VirtualBox. The only difference between the Azure-based or cloud-based database service or software as a service and the on-premises service is, in the cloud, the whole infrastructure is managed for you by the cloud vendor. So for example, in this case, Microsoft is taking the responsibility. They are managing the underlying server, they are managing the underlying virtual machine, and even the physical hardware. You don't need to worry about it. All you need to worry about the database and the data you are going to store in the database, right? So which is really a good thing, especially once the small to medium organization, they don't need to worry about okay, who's going to actually take the backup and who's going to look after their databases. For example, if the database got corrupted, how we going to actually get it from the backup? Everything has been managed on your behalf. All you need to just pay for the database service. So by saying it, let's jump into the lab and we will start creating our first SQL database in Azure. All right, so we are on the Azure portal. Like I mentioned, I'm going to go to all services, and you can see we have Azure SQL. Let me just, sorry. There we go. So you can see we have Azure SQL that we are going to use. So let me hit on that. And let me just close the Zoom back to its normal. Yeah, I think that's the better. So I'm going to create it. Hit create. And like I mentioned, in this exercise or in this video, we're going to use the single SQL database. We are not going to create an instance. We are not going to create a SQL virtual machine. And I will explain the difference once we go towards that option. By the way, SQL Managed Instance is not available in the free subscription, unfortunately, because I think that requires some fortune back to Microsoft. So they are not actually providing it. If you want to use it, you need to change the subscription to pay as you go, and obviously you need to pay for using that service. But at this stage, I think we are pretty good to use the SQL database. So let's click and we are going to use single database. We are not going to use elastic pool. Elastic pool I'm going to discuss during the creation process, because then it makes more sense while we are discussing the Azure based SQL. And obviously database server is more like, you know, a blank server that you can create based on your own configuration requirement, and that database server is ready to host the database. Like it's more like, you know, a blank container which is now ready to contain the databases that you want to create over the time, right? So let's start with single database, and I'm going to hit create. All right, so you can see my subscription is already been selected. I only have one subscription. Otherwise, if you have more subscription, it's gonna show you the subscription name in the list, and you can select it from there. And then based on your subscription, because obviously the resource group, if you remember our previous video, resource groups are linked with the subscription. So as soon as you select the subscription, resource groups are going to be filtered, and you're only going to see those resource groups which are linked to the selected subscription. So in that case, if you remember, we have created the developer resource group in our previous video, if you remember, and that we're going to use the resource group because, like I mentioned, resource group is going to be a collection, or more like a namespace if you want to give a technical name, or more like a container that contain all the resources that you want to create to address one project requirement or two project requirements, or maybe one big program requirement. So that is how you can actually, you know, group resources together to make sure the administration and management is easy over the time. Obviously, it's not like you're only going to have one or two projects these days. Even with the medium to large scale organization, the assets increase very quickly. Like we have even hundreds of servers who are running different sort of applications for the enterprise. So it's always very viable to segregate the resources in the cloud by their project, and resource group is the best way to do it. If you don't have, or if you want to create a new separate resource group, you can create it, because then it will provide you the opportunity to keep to put your SQL database into this into the newly created resource group. And look how beautiful it is. Like for example, we have created one resource group for our devs, which is more like using the operational databases OLTP system, and one for the data warehouses resource group. And we know that both look like the database, but both are completely different world. So that's what I'm going to actually explain, and that will really help you if you haven't actually worked a lot with the database and data warehouses, and you are going for the job interviews, and you are facing the question. Please watch those videos where I'm explaining the difference between the databases and data warehouses and how the whole architecture works. That will surely help you a lot, you know, to pass the interview and get the job. Because once you have clear understanding, you're going to have a lot of benefit or edge over those candidates who don't have that knowledge. Okay, I'm now going to come and I'm going to call it dev DB. I'm just going to create one database, and you can see and just give it a name, Analytica Dev DB. You can give the name that you want to. Now it is asking the server, although we are creating a software as a service, so we are creating the SQL database, but obviously that database is going to be hosted somewhere. So once you are creating your first database, you have to mention the server, because that database is going to sit that server. Now imagine you are really, you know, outlining the boundary of your own world. Like, okay, I have one database, I'm going to put it into that particular empire, which I'm going to own it, I'm going to rule it, nobody can enter in it. And Microsoft assured that, okay, your area is your empire, and you are the owner, or you are the ruler of your empire, so nobody can enter without your permission. So obviously we need to actually define the empire, which is obviously the server. So let me just I don't have any server yet. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create a new server. So now it will take us to the server creation screen. And once we finish the entries in here and we click OK, it's going to actually bring us back. It's not going to create the server. It just capture the entries and then put us back on the main wizard where we are filling up the remaining entries regarding to our SQL database. So I'm going to do, I'm just going to, like I mentioned, you remember my naming convention, sit where I belong to dev. That's the tag that, okay, what environment I'm creating that server for, and then SQL, and obviously I'm just giving it a just random number because normally, like I mentioned, most of the organizations, not like they only have one database server. Theoretically, we have multiple SQL servers used for different purposes, right? And there's a full-fledged conversation, or I would say, and a topic of another video, why we need multiple server, how we can gain the advantage or benefit of having multiple server within an organization. I'm not going to change the location because I'm using the free tier or free service, so it might not work in some of the region. And obviously, I'm not going to put any sensitive data. I'm just going to put some open source data or open data set in it. So I'm pretty comfortable. Authentication. The next option on this screen is authentication. If you have the Active Directory integrated or configure, then obviously you have the capability. And now imagine that you are going to configure the service exactly the same way like you normally do into your local data center. Like your server is going to be integrated with your Active Directory. If you have the Active Directory configured and you have the domain configured, you have the employees who got their AD names or employee Active Directory user ID, you can use those Active Directory user IDs to configure their access on the server, right? It's nothing different in that way, right? Which is really a great thing. Like imagine you are reusing your knowledge you used to work a lot in the on premises, and now you are shifting your practices towards the Azure cloud. So imagine nothing has been changed. The only thing change is more like the efficiency has been increased because now Microsoft is coming to you and asking you, okay, give us your infrastructure. We are going to manage infrastructure for you. All you need to care about your data and your database and your data modeling and your data architecture, right? So all these things are at your end. Rest hardware, performance, and the disaster recovery, backup and restore, leave it with us. We will manage it on your behalf, which obviously take lots of overhead, not from yourself but also from your IT department. So in this case, because I haven't actually configured the Active Directory yet, right, and Active Directory itself is a topic which is not related to the data and analytics, but it's a good knowledge. If you can have that knowledge, that's great. Like you can gain a lot of benefits, and at some stage I'm going to show you, especially once we come towards the security and auditing concept, then we'll discuss how the Active Directory authentication knock out the SQL Server based authentication, because Active Directory authentication is way better and more manageable compared to the SQL Server authentication. And theoretically in the industry, best practice is always use Active Directory group or user-based authentication, because obviously then the whole security has been managed centrally through your Active Directory. So there's less chance of any breach, or any export there, or any mistake in terms of unauthorized access, right? So that's a separate topic. I'm just actually providing you some high level overview, so it just give you some concept. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the SQL authentication. So let me just give it a generic account. Obviously, you can use any account name that you would like, and password. So I think all information has been fed in, and we are good. So let's click OK. Now, server is there, and now it's asking me what to use this elastic pool. So now imagine the elastic pool. If you remember the SQL Server on-premises installation, if you remember, even though you know what I can do, let me show it to you in here, right? So that's the on-premises SQL Server that we have installed in the previous video, right? And that SQL Server is limited to these resources. Like for example, if I actually show it to you, if it needs more memory, for example, then I have allocated, if I show it to you in here, we have limited the memory to 9 gig. So even if SQL Server try to get more memory than 9 gig, it's not going to get it. And the reason here, because there is no memory available beyond 9 gig for the SQL Server. We have total memory available on this machine as 10 gig, and out of 9 gig, I've already allocated to SQL Server, and rest 1 gig, I'm going to use it with my operating system. So my operating system is not stuck by, and even SQL Server is not going to consume the 99% memory. By the way, I've seen in production environments, sometimes they don't change or adjust this setting. And once the server was really hit, the memory consumption by SQL Server is 99%. And the server was behaving very badly because operating system is really juggling for the resources, because the whole memory was consumed by the SQL Server. So pay a lot of attention once you are preparing your production virtual machine or production server, that make sure you limit the SQL Server memory, because in term of peak hour or in term of high load, SQL Server is going to allocate it or consume all the memory that it can be. Whatever allocation we're going to do, it's going to chew up all the memory. And let me see if I can show. No, we haven't actually reached to that level. Otherwise, I'm going to show you the SQL Server. You're gonna see it will consume all the memory which is available for it. I don't have SQL Server service, but anyway, once it comes in, I'm gonna show it to you. If we can, just try to stress out the server on this one, then I'll show you how much memory it actually consume, and you can literally monitor that memory consumption through Task Manager or through the Activity Monitor. However, so that's the data-centric environment model, where you have the limited resources and you cannot, decrease. You can decrease the memory consumption or increase the memory consumption. But imagine if you have, one pool and you want to, adjust the resources into that pool. So, for example, you want, one database has been used by many users, and the resource requirement for one database is high. And I think that's where the diagram will work better. So let's go to my favorite tool, which is obviously MS Paint. Okay, let me see. Yeah. So let's say we have two databases. One is really fat and you can see the size. Let me call it, for example, that is financial database, and that is human resource, right? Obviously, by the name, you can see financial database. Actually, I have actually, let me see if I can swap it. Yeah. I actually put it the other way around. Move it in here. And let me take this one. And I'm actually assuming a scenario where our financial database has been used a lot, like it is integrated with many other systems like CRM, marketing, sales systems, and even a couple of other systems, internal and external, which are feeding the data into our financial database through the integration. So obviously this database is going to be stressed out more compared to human resource, which obviously is going to be used, but not up to that level, because obviously human resource databases are containing the employee information, and they have less transaction in a day compared to financial. Now the load of the transaction obviously is not going to be balanced with our current on-premises environment. It's difficult to to change the resources between the database. So for example, if one database is stressed out, we allocate more resources to that database, or if database is less stressed out, we take out the resources from it. But with the cloud, now that is possible, until unless we move one database to a different server which has more capabilities or more resources, and we let it run from there, right? But that's not a very good practice. Contrary to that, with the cloud environment, now you have the concept of elastic pool, where you can literally adjust the resources dynamically based on the requirement, or based on the load on your databases. And once you adjust those settings, database will get the resources accordingly. And we have multiple model to allocate these resources. The whole resource allocation comes through the elastic pool. And like you can see, elastic pool, the term, both term is more like self-explanatory. Like elastic means they are expandable, they are flexible in terms of expansion of the resources, or increasing or decreasing of the resources. And pool means that where we have multiple candidate, and we are putting them together, and they are sharing the resources. So that's the whole concept of elastic pool. Coming back to our database, so what are we going to do? I'm going to now create an elastic pool beside my SQL database, because maybe if I create another 2-3 database, I want to make sure they are using the same pool, or maybe I can divide them into multiple pool based, really depend upon what kind of database they are, what kind of application they are going to connect to, and what nature of the data they are going to contain or provide to the business. So we don't have, it will again now show me the wizard or the screen that I want to. So let me give it a name. I'm going to, so that's the developer. Cool. Because my developers are going to use it, and you can see the standard is 100 EDTU. So that's the unit based on the resources gonna allocate. So now there are 3 major terms that actually play in calculating this EDTU. DTU, I believe, data transfer unit. I think I need to change, so we have a better. So you can see we have the DTU, which is aligned with our database size. So as soon as I believe now you can see what I'm trying to show it to you. So if I actually move it, so the minimum DTU is more like the combination of the CPU and memory power, and it is directly linked with the storage. So more storage you have to allocate more DTU, because that will help you to align the SQL Server resource power with your data storage requirement. So for example, now you can see with my 50, all I can go up to 500 gig. Now, once I have more than this requirement, I have to move to the next DTU level, which is obviously 100. And unfortunately, you can only jump based on, on the given tier. Let me see. Yeah, it's not editable, right? So let's keep it to 50, and that's one pricing model, or one model that you can use. There is another one which is the core base, and if you remember previously, Microsoft license works based on the course. That's a complete license discussion. The only thing, just keep in mind, you have the DTU base, which obviously you don't need to worry about the how much memory is going to be allocated, how much CPU power is going to be allocated. All you need to select your storage requirement, and then it will show you what DTU you can allocate based on that power, right? So for example, if I have 200 gig required, I can stick to DTU 50. But if I feel that, okay, now the database is not behaving well, I can even increase the power to 200 to see whether it's going to address, and you will see a drastic impact in terms of your SQL database performance. So that's the whole concept of using DTU model, which is really great in terms, and you can see the costing is really good, like especially in terms of US dollar. It's a per month. Imagine you have the SQL database which you are using and paying, and which provides you the capability of 200 gig, and you are only paying $237 per month. Wow. Right? It's really cheap. Tell you the truth, in the production environment, based on my experience, like I mentioned previously, I have seen people paying so much, and even you won't believe, multiple grants, like thousands and thousands for for really small databases which they haven't used. And then here we have one database with 200 gigabyte storage with really good memory and CPU, and we are only paying, and if we are not satisfied with the storage requirement, we can increase it. Now the beauty is, imagine a very slight increase in the price. Here is the difference between the cloud and the on-premise. In on-premises, you have all your costs upfront. As soon as you pay that cost, then you utilize over the time. In here, from the day one, you can control your costs. So for example, if I know right now my data is not going to be more than 200 gig, so why I need to allocate 500 gig and pay an additional $100 every month, right? Once I reach to the point where, okay, now my data is going to be 500 gig, then I can actually extend the database size to 500 gig, and it's going to charge me very I would say minor difference compared to my initial amount, right? So you can see, and over the time, obviously that requires a continuous estimation, which is not a big deal. Tell you the truth, if your databases are on every size that they are growing with average speed, then that model is really good, right? But obviously another aspect, if your database is highly transactional oriented, I would recommend try to use the general purpose, where you can allocate the resources upfront, and based on that you will you have to pay money, but you don't need to worry about expanding or shrinking the database size based on the demand, right? And let me show it to you if I have more sizes. So you can see Gen 1, maximum memory it can go. Wow, you can see such a big server that they are trying to allocate to us, right? And we can see the cost is $184 per core per month, right? So now here we can see we are just sticking with 2 cores, and even and now that's the beauty. So for example, if your organization has already invested in SQL Server, you already have your SQL Server license available in your current production, and now you are going and migrating your data into Azure SQL, so you can repurpose your SQL license. It's not like your existing license is going to be wasted and you have to buy a new license. You can save significant amount if you bring your own license, and believe me, it's going to actually reduce the cost further. So which is really a great, I would say, benefit of repurposing the existing license from Microsoft. I don't have the license, and you can see I can change the core. So for example, if I actually take it to the 8 core. Obviously, I'm using the free subscription. So these are the point where you're gonna see Microsoft is, slightly pushing you. Okay, yeah, you're using our services free of cost, but think about upgrading it to pay as go, because you might not get all the fancy features you are expecting us to provide you. If you want to use those, please purchase, and then we will provide you all the capabilities. So for your trial, please move back to the minimum side. So okay, so the minimum maximum in the free trial is available 2 core 500 gig, which is great, and I think I can live with that. And you can see the cost is really controlled, like 442 with 2 cores with 500 gig data. And if I just add zone redundancy, like it's gonna actually make sure the data has been into multiple zone, which really gonna help us to make sure our data is available all the time. So that's the high availability scenario, where if some one data center is down, or there's an issue in one data center, the other data center is gonna be active and start responding to the client queries. So that's really, and you can see the cost is slightly up, which is I would say a very fair call, like because it's more like making sure your database is available all the time. Literally there's zero downtime for your database, imagine. And you don't need to manage anything. Microsoft is managing everything for you. Okay, yes, we are going to make this micro. What I'm going to do, I'm actually moving back because the cost is quite high. My subscription budget is really small compared to the cost it is showing it to me. I only have to $79, and I don't want to pay from my credit card. So let me change it back to the DTU base, right? So I'm good. I can live with 50 DTU, and let me see if I can. So you can see a very minor 100 DTU, 9.77 gig. I'm going to use it. And I think for the demo purpose, that's more than enough. So let's use that 100 DTU. And even I can, standard, and in here you have seen it, obviously it's more expensive. It's all about how much you want to pay. So remember my initial comment when I was discussing the cloud concept, everything costs you fortune. In cloud, keep in mind everything costs you fortune. So make sure you pick things carefully. You have to monitor things carefully. Cloud is great. Cloud comes with a lot of power, but those power comes with great responsibilities. If you are not going to take the responsibilities, if you are not going to put the right, right monitors or right matrices to inform you about your costing and billing and budgets, it might cost you a bit more than you expected, or more than what you have actually allocated, right? So keep a very close eye, and I think that's all the administration overhead that you're gonna face once you use the cloud environment. So I think let's stick to 9 gig. Now, $73, imagine a world. I know the database size is unrealistic, which I can understand, but obviously look at the price, $73. Who's going to provide you the database, fully managed database in the cloud environment with just $73? And you can use all features of the database, because I think currently the database version is available 2019 SQL Server version, and you don't need to worry about all these versioning and anything. Microsoft is upgrading and making sure all the database are up to date in terms of versioning or in terms of feature set, right? All you need to focus on your modeling, architecting, or development activities. So I'm just thinking, should I use, yeah, let me just use 9.77 gig at this stage. Let me hit apply. So I'm good. And now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to, yeah. So now there's something you need to keep an eye, like I mentioned, because sometime, if you won't keep an eye, sometime you get a bill which you are not expecting from Microsoft, right? So Microsoft is continuously telling you that much you're gonna actually you're gonna pay at the end of the month. So yeah, and then later on I'm gonna show you how you can monitor the cost through the cost portal. Microsoft really built a cost management portal and billing portal where you can actually monitor the costing on day-to-day basis. That will give you a very good idea at the about the end of the month bill that's gonna land in your inbox for Microsoft, and you're gonna pay it to Microsoft for utilizing the cloud-based services. In this case, this SQL database is gonna cost us 147.22 US dollar a month, so which I believe I'm pretty happy to pay through my free subscription. So let me hit create. Now it has been submitted. You can see in the log activity, it's now started the deployment process. Let me prepare our data. So now let it run, because what it is doing, it is now based on our entries that we have provided. It's going to prepare not only the server, it's going to prepare the SQL database, and it's also going to prepare the SQL pool that we can use to adjust the resources based on the demand. So imagine all that work that is happening behind the scene, and literally within minutes you're gonna have everything up and running. That's the best part of utilizing cloud environment. Previously, especially, we know who are working in the on-premises environment how difficult it is to get new server, and how much additional overhead it put on our IT teams, because they need to, if the server is already stressed out with the existing resources, they need to spin up a new server, they need to install the operating system, they need to install the SQL server, and then they adjust all the security and making sure it is integrated with the Active Directory, it is under the compliance of the organization policies, right? And then after that, they give it back to us for our work, right? Now imagine within the cloud environment, obviously, don't get me wrong, we still need to make sure our servers are fully integrated with the Azure Active Directory. They are fully compliant. There is a cyber security part that needs to evaluate the architecture that we are creating, but that is way quicker than the on-premises model. Secondly, with the on-premises, we always hit by the upper bound, that at some point we're gonna hit by, okay, now that's it. Now we need a new server, now we need a separate server, now we need a new virtual machine, because our existing virtual machine is overloaded, it's reached to its max, we cannot extend it, blah blah blah, all these reasons that comes at some stage, right? And and I'm not talking about, to tell you the truth, these top ASX companies with small to medium enterprises, especially with the medium enterprises who have limited budgets, right? And they cannot afford, such quick upgrades or such quick, enhancement or scaling of their infrastructure. They sometimes really struggle with all these requirements that come on their way while they are executing the company strategy, and that requires the additional technical capability. But with the cloud, the best thing is, with a very minor, costing, you can achieve all these things without any interruption. So that, I think that's more like the game changing factor, which is now pushing many organizations to shift their attention from on premises towards the cloud. Now, during the discussion, our resource has been created, and I can now, if you can see it, it's showing me, yeah, it's all successful. If you're gonna have any error, you're gonna see the error. First, you're gonna see that your deployment has been failed. It's not going to show you the green. You're gonna have the red sign. That means there are errors, and then you need to go and you need to look at the error, look at the details, and then if the message tells you that you can fix something, you're gonna fix it, and then you're gonna rerun the deployment. In our case, we are good that our server has been created, our database has been created. So let's go and have a look on our database. Sweet. You can see our database is up and running, and I'm quite excited to connect to that database. So there are multiple areas that I want to show it to you in terms of, using that. First is compute plus storage. Now, if we just, click on it, right? Elastic server here is elastic, like this is a part of an elastic pool, and you can see we can change it, right? And data max size, you can see is the 2 gig at this stage. We can go and we can change it if we want to, but I think I'm good at this stage. It's a geo redundant backup. We can change it to zone. Geo and zone is more like, in the geo redundant, like Microsoft has different data center into multiple, I would say, location who are dispersed geographically, and Microsoft is putting that data into different locations. So in case of disaster, that can be retrieved to the other location somewhere, maybe in another geographical area, right? So keep in mind that I think you need to be very careful if you have a very sensitive data or your data is very compliant. So for example, in Australia, we cannot allow to store our data across the border, right? All the data needs to be within the Australian border. So what we normally do, use the zone redundant backup storage, like, so that means in Australia, we have two zones. One is obviously Australia East, and second one is Australia Southeast. So it's going to actually keep the image on these two locations. So if one down, the other one can take over while they are fixing the first one. So you can understand. But if you select the geo redundant backup, keep in mind your data is going to be across the border, right? Which might create a trouble when you go with the compliance or the auditing teams for the auditing activities, right? So that's a very sensitive part that you need to pay attention. But in this case, because it's a demo, so I'm fine in that case. Okay, so it has created it's saying it's part of the elastic pool, so I can go and I can create increase the size over there. By default, it has allocated 2 gig for me, which I'm good. Now that's the great thing. Like you can see, it has already created a connection for me, which is ADO.NET, JDBC, whatever driver I have. So at some stage, if I'm using, for example, my Spark notebook, or if I'm going to use, any other service that require the JDBC connector, all I need to actually copy that, and then we'll put that connection string and connect to our database. Even, what I'll do, in one of the video, we're going to actually use this database to connect to our Databricks notebook, and we will try to load the data from the data lake into this database, which will be really a great use case for us. But at this time, what I'm going to do, I will take out this connection string, because I'm going to connect it to my SQL Server Management Studio. Let me copy it in here. So that's my Windows name. Sorry, that's my server name, which is hosting my database. And like I mentioned, because I don't have Active Directory configured, so unfortunately I have to go with SQL Server Authentication. But obviously in our real environment, we have the Active Directory fully configured in Azure. So we'll use the Windows Authentication to connect to these services. You don't need to select. You can still live with Windows Authentication. In this case, you can see I don't have the Active Directory user account, so that's why I'm actually sticking to this one. So what I'm going to do, SVC SQL Dev admin, and I'm going to put my password. Hopefully I'm typing correctly. I want to remember, and let me hit OK. There we go. So that's the first positive indicator that it's asking us to sign in, because obviously we are trying to connect to Azure portal through our client application. So it needs to make sure our IP is whitelisted, and that requires us to sign in. But if you are connecting through Active Directory, all these things are not required. What I'm going to do, I'm going to sign in. I'm going to come back shortly. So bear with me. All right, so I am connected, and now you can see it is showing me my client IP address, which is obviously a public IP address. Remember, in our real environments, the settings are very different. Normally, our servers are connected to our local network, which has been created on the Azure subscription account. So even though we are in the internet environment, but we have our own private area. So that's why we use private IP instead of the public IP. But because I'm just using the demo environment, so I can live with my client IP, which is obviously the public IP, which my internet provider is using for me to connect to the internet. So I think I'm good in this instance. Let me click OK. Okay, so it looks like I haven't provided the right username and password. Let me see where I'm mistaking. How I mistakenly put dash instead of underscore, which is not good. I will change it. Yeah, so we have SVC. Now I think it should be all right. Let me just again retype the password. And voila, we are connected to the Azure SQL Database, which is really great. Like you can see within minutes, we spin up a server, we spin up an elastic pool that is now controlling the resources, and we have our database. So now I can show you the database in here, and there we go. A full-fledged working database is ready for us. You can see all the capabilities table, and tell you the truth, I don't think you can see any difference except it has more feature, like it has query store, and Microsoft has configured all these things for you. So what a great a way to set up the SQL environment with minimum complexity, and everything is ready to use. So what I'm going to do in this case, let me first create a schema, because as a next step we're going to actually load the data, and we'll see if we can manage to load the data into this this database. So let me first create. I'm creating a schema. So the schema has been created, so I can show it to you. Security. Staging schema is there. Now what I can do, I can go in and I can copy my product table, because I'm going to, and if you remember, that's the product table that we have used for our MDS, Master Data Services, right? So it's going to keep all the information which is linked to our product categories and subcategories. And just for your refresher, if you haven't seen that video, let me show it to you. That's the table. Keep in mind, it's just some sample table that we are using. And even what I can do, yeah, I think at this stage we are fine. We just want to see, and later on we come in and we'll see if we can add more rows and see how it actually perform once the data size really grows. So in that case, now my table is ready, I do believe. And one more thing, the database performance, especially while you are working, it really depends upon the internet or the speed. Don't worry about. Don't think that it's going to be your Azure fault, because now we are communicating this database, which is not sitting on our server, that is sitting somewhere in the data center, and we are connected it through the internet, right? So if it is slow, you need to be patient. What I'm going to do, I'm going to import the data. And how I'm going to import the data, I'm going to show it to you. I'll use my existing server, which I'm on, and I'll actually read the table in, and I'll load the data into this database. So what I'll do, I'll just use my, yeah, I'm going to use dot normally represent the current server and the current authentication I can use. And now this one I'm going to use, yeah. So SQL authentication, I'm going to use SQL SQL. And I'm not using that. I'm going to, by the way, if you don't understand this import and export wizard, don't worry about it. That's part of the SQL Server integration services. We have full-fledged video series on the ETL, extract, transform, and load. We're going to actually look into that part separately, right? Right now, just understand that we are loading the data within our Azure SQL database that we have recently created. So if now I click on that, yeah, I can successfully connect. So once it's open, I'll show you the databases. That means you have connected successfully. Otherwise, it's going to give you the error. If we have any problem, like if the password is incorrect, if the username is incorrect, server name is incorrect, or even if you have a problem connecting to the Azure account, then it's going to give you error. So I think now we are good. So let me click next. Yeah, we are going to copy the data. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to use, and you can see it's not going to create because we have a different icon. If you have worked with the import export wizard, it's showing us that, okay, it's going to load the data in the existing table. So let me click the edit mapping. Yeah, we are going to append rows, and we can even delete the rows which is not required. However, I think we have the auto column defined on our table, which is the rec ID, which automatically incremented once the new rows comes in. So in that case, I just hit enable identity insert. Let me hit next. Yeah, I'm not going to. So now you can see it will allow me to save the SSI aspect. What I'm going to do, let me just save it on the server, sorry, on the file system, because we will use that package later on to enhance the ETL capabilities to load the data into this Azure SQL database. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to save it on a separate. Azure data loader, right? SQL data loader. I'll provide description later. I think we are good. Let me hit the button and let it run to load the 3 records. Beautiful. The guys, within, I think, less than an hour, we have not only created the SQL, we have created the Elastic pool, we have set up the server, although it's hidden from our end, but behind the scene, a server has been created, and we created a database successfully, and then we created a table in it, and we have loaded the rows in it, right? So that's how great and how simple the SQL server, Azure SQL is. Like, it really provides you the great capabilities to boost or speed up your dev activities, especially within the modern requirements of the enterprises. I hope you will enjoy this video, and obviously stay tuned because we have so many things now doing on this newly created database. We're going to actually learn the full SQL, T-SQL on this database. We're going to actually build the SSIS packages, and we're going to connect this to our Power BI. So lot to do. Stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next video. And if you have any question, comment, please put it in the comment section. I'm more than happy to answer those questions.